So good morning. Thank you, Sonia, for the introduction. It's great to be here again. This is actually my fourth visit to the European Chatbots and Conversational AI Summit. The very first one, it was virtual, and it was very small attendance, I think. The second, we had about 40 or 50 people in the audience in person. And now look what it is. So it's really fantastic. And I think we have to thank Sydney and his team for the way it's become such an amazing event. So last year, when we met, it was only a couple of months after the launch of ChatGPT, and everybody was sort of wondering, well, what does the future hold for conversational AI, and particularly for designers and tool makers? How are things going to be? Now, a year on, an awful lot has happened, and what I want to do is to, first of all, just say a little bit about the two different approaches, the traditional approach and then the LLM-based approach. And then I want to present a case study which illustrates how LLMs can be integrated into a chatbot that does a retail assistance. So for traditional chatbots, well, for any conversational chatbot, it really has to be able to do three things. It has to be able to understand what the user or the customer says to it. It has to be able to respond in some way, have some output. And then if it's going to be a dialogue, then it has to be able to continue the dialogue in a sensible, coherent sort of a way. So those are three different aspects. So one of the tasks for the traditional designer, these were called NLU-based chatbots for some funny reason. They had to devise the intents. So for example, if there were going to be questions about what the weather's going to be like, that would be a weather intent. If it was, for example, in one of the projects we've been involved in, the person saying, I'm feeling very sad, that would be maybe a sad intent, and so on. And there was a lot of work involved in that, and then once you had that, you would train the system, and it would recognize, hopefully, the user's input and put that into a bucket of that particular intent. And then once you had that intent, then that triggered a response. The responses were typically designed by the designer. And in some cases, if it was going to be a multi-turn conversation, it would then trigger a, well, in the RASA system that we used, it was called a story, where there would be intent and then all the different conversation flow that was going to follow on from that. There were some problems, of course, with this, because once you scale the system up from maybe just talking about the weather, and you had a lot more intents. I mean, some of the people yesterday had hundreds of intents. You got the problem that you may not have intents for some of the things people would say. There could be overlapping. So we found in a project we had, people could be saying they were sad, or they could be saying they were depressed or lonely. And were those three different intents, or did they all map into the one? Because what the robot might then say might have been similar. And you might well have utterances that didn't even map easily to any intents. If you were at Grant's talk yesterday, he gave lots of examples, and I'll give one in the next slide. Well, then with the responses, as I say, they tended to be predefined, and so that then gave a lack of flexibility. So that could be a problem. And then again, the actual stories were generally predefined as well. And so there was a lack of flexibility as well. I'll sort of illustrate these things now. This is quite a nice little illustration that Alan Nicol, CEO of RASA, the tool that we used a lot in our projects, showed where there could be a problem with an intent. So here we have a situation where the customer wants to add his wife to the credit card, and the normal practice is to come into the branch and sign up and so on. And then he says, I have a broken leg, well, that doesn't really fit into the normal sort of happy path of it. And so how is that actually going to be handled? And as Alan says, in an intent-based model, that would be actually difficult to handle. Now, I'll not go into the details. You can look at the paper there if you want to see how it was done. But basically, the idea was to put together a story, an unhappy path, for the event where somebody couldn't come. And so there could be phrases like, I've got to look after the children, or the car's broken down, and so on. And they found that actually in a zero-shot situation, something like I had a broken leg could actually be generalized to that particular unhappy story. So that sort of worked quite well. And you can follow up more from Raza in that reference. The responses, as I say, generally would have used templates where you just fill in the value of destination or day and so on. Or there was, and this is the plug for Scotland, there was a natural generation, language generation pipeline system developed by two scholars in Scotland, I think in Edinburgh initially, maybe later in Aberdeen. It still is used, I believe, but they are also incorporating LLMs now into that. So that was another approach. But really what people are moving now towards is the use of generative AI. So just looking at conversation flow, if you have a very simple scenario, it's not too bad. You can just go down it and maybe the user can only say yes or no. But of course, it doesn't give any chance for them to say anything else or to deviate from that. So in this particular example, if you go down the left-hand side of it, for example, and at the point where the person says no, from the point that the situation didn't help, a whole dialogue could evolve then to try and find out what the problem was, and it could be very, very open-ended, and that then becomes a challenge for this approach. So LLMs then, they promise a lot that they can more successfully interpret the user's input, and they do to a great extent. They can produce dynamically responses, as we'll see sometimes not the ones we want. And you can actually have a continual flow that will evolve on a turn-by-turn basis, which is more or less the way human dialogue does. I mean, normally we don't start off in a dialogue with a whole script that we're going to follow, unless we're maybe an agent of some sort trying to achieve some task. But in a normal conversation, it really evolves on a turn-by-turn basis. So that sounds more realistic anyway. So what I want to do now is to illustrate some of this. This is a short, well, it's an example of a case study developed by Syndeo. Syndeo is a company based in Belfast with outreach in many locations throughout the world. And in this particular example, a customer, Sophia, wants to buy a gaming laptop for her son, Alex, for his 18th birthday, but she wants to keep it a surprise. So she has to do a bit of search herself, and she does a bit of research into gaming laptops, but she doesn't really know much about it. And so she looks at the company's website and so on. She watches Alex a little bit and what he's doing. And then the next time she comes back to the web page, the chatbot pops up proactively and engages her in a conversation. There's a lot going on here, but what you could look at actually, or what I want you to focus on, is that initially the chatbot will try and get information about what her requirements are. At a particular point, it asks a question which she doesn't answer. That's what we normally call a digression, but it handles that. This is all using LLMs. It handles that and gets back on track. And then at the point where she wants a summary of reviews, but there's 100 of them, it summarizes these down into one short paragraph. So let's hope this works.
Alex, Sophia revisits a website she was on yesterday. The Syndeo retail assistant appears, offering help with gaming laptops. Utilizing advanced generative AI, context, and guardrails, the assistant steps in, gathering Sophia's needs and context. It helps guide Sophia on other factors to consider when choosing a gaming laptop. Notice how the assistant handles the conversation when Sophia doesn't answer the budget question on the first attempt? It smoothly rephrases and asks her again. Once it captures Sophia's needs, the assistant scans the product catalog, recommending options. Sophia can either add the laptop to her cart or dive into reviews. Sophia opts to view the reviews and sees a concise summary of over 100 reviews in just one paragraph. This boosts her confidence and reinforces her decision to buy. Sophia makes her choice, and the retail assistant refreshes the cart. But it doesn't stop there. Recognizing Sophia has budget to spare, it suggests complementary products for her laptop, ensuring she remains within her budget. Sophia zeroes in on a mouse, weighing up the 3 suggested choices. She picks the Acer, and her cart gets an update.
Yeah, so there's actually more to
choices,
that.
Sophia moves to check out, but stalls for a few minutes, uncertain about the delivery fees. Quick to pick up on Sophia's pause, the Syndeo retail assistant intervenes, addressing her worries. It deftly steers her back to finalizing the purchase, avoiding a potential cart abandonment.
Yeah, okay. I'll say a little bit more now about that.
After finalizing her
I'm going to move on. So you can see there's tailored guidance there, just talking about the high-level functionalities at the moment. By integrating what Sophia wants, which it has been able to gather from her, with what the company offers, it's able to give personalized assistance. This then gives a much smoother and much more successful customer journey than other solutions. It then will hopefully improve customer loyalty. So looking at that in a bit more detail, what these apps are doing, they're called experience apps. They're building outcomes that will be used at every stage in the customer journey. And from the technical point of view, what they're doing is they're merging the different technologies, so the more traditional AI with directed dialogue, and I'll show you this in a minute, with LLMs, with the benefits of generative AI. And this then provides a context from the interaction with the user and merging that into the customer journey. And one of the other aspects, which is of course very important, is the use of the guardrails in order to be able to reduce the problem that we all know about of hallucination. Again, we'll sort of see that in a minute. So two main sort of aspects here. One is the use of RAG, and if you were here yesterday, I think you would know what RAG now is, where you're actually taking documents from a particular source. In this case, it'll be the company selling the laptops, so it'll be documents about what they offer, and these are then merged into a vector database. I'll not go into all the technology of that, it's really quite complex. But that then enables semantic search in order to actually retrieve the most suitable outcome, or in this case, the most suitable laptop. Then, from the point of view of the LLMs, the primary LLM that is used in this application can perform several tasks, as you can see. The language prediction and understanding, translation if necessary, text summarization, which we saw in the example, and then just basic general knowledge. But then there's a second LLM which then looks at the response from the primary one and validates that in order to get rid of any potential hallucinations and other violations of things that might go against the business rules of the company. So what this does then is provide a much safer and more responsible environment. A little bit more detail again. So here, if you look down the middle, it may be hard to see, you actually have the traditional conversation flow with different stages in it, different nodes or states, as you might want to call it. But the difference between that and the traditional approach is that these are integrated with LLMs. And so they enable better language understanding, for example, better response output dynamically, and so on. But at the same time, keeping very, very strictly to the prescribed customer journey. The next slide actually just shows an example, which I can't see to read out to you, but that is the instruction that is actually sent to the system to generate a dialogue and first of all find out the requirements and then merge those with the company's catalog and then present only 3 laptops, because you don't really want to present dozens and dozens and confuse the customer. And so that's like the instruction that's given to the chatbot. Now, that's only one example, really, of what Syndeo have been developing. They have several use cases. We have marketing, sales, which is what we've been talking about here, and also service. And then within those, there are different apps that can perform different subtasks within that particular use case. So there's really quite a lot there on offer. And then just some of the benefits, as we more or less said, you get much higher automation rates, increased conversion, upsell and cross-sell, more personalized customer service, which is very important, and increased operational efficiency. Now, I'm not an expert on Syndeo. We have in the audience Rodney over here, the good-looking guy there in the front row. Oh, he's looking around, who will be able to tell you more about the product if you're interested. And Rodney is organizing a chatbot workshop scheduled for the 9th of April in London. And if you would like to attend that, go and catch Rodney then after, or myself as well, but better really to catch Rodney. He's the one who's doing the organization. So one last slide. Now available is a book which my co-author, Marina, who's sitting here at the front, and I have put together. We met just about a year ago, and we found we had a lot of common interests, and we put a proposal to A-Press, which is a Springer subsidiary, and they took us on, and they wanted a book in 6 months, which we did manage to deliver. We started off with the idea of conversational AI and where is it going to be heading. So we had examples really of traditional approaches and then the way LLMs could be used. Then there were 2 chapters on the technology, but not at a fairly high level really, not full of equations and so on, so readable for people. And then the middle part of the book was more practical. It was about prompt engineering. Some of you may have been at Marina's masterclass on Tuesday, so some of it would be in the book. And then we looked at other issues like evaluation, ethics, and then the way ahead. Of course, I mean, things have changed even since we submitted the book. We were talking about Google Bard, and now it's called Gemini, and you really just can't keep up. But we tried to develop a book that would have a fair amount of generality and be sort of usable within the future. We have a notebook then associated with the book, so that if you log into your favorite interface, ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever, you can then simply just take a lot of the prompts that are in the book and paste them in and try the things out for yourself. So anyway, it's now available on Amazon. I think you can also get an electronic version on Springer Link if you want an ebook or even just individual chapters. So highly recommended, and if you want to talk to us about it, then come to us afterwards. So thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Professor. We do have time for some questions, so is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question?
Go.
I asked this on the app, but I'm curious how you evaluate and monitor the outputs to make sure that accuracy is, above average and that you're not hallucinating, and just to really look at like the security as well.
Yeah, I can't answer that specifically for the app here because I don't know, but more generally, you can have things like rules or policies, and before you get to the stage of actually put in you generate what's going to be potentially the output, and then you can look at the policies. So if there's, for example, sexual content that you want to avoid, or harmful content, or political, whatever, if these are specified in your guardrails, then that can then cause the output not to be generated and then to maybe try again. So that's more or less the approach that people are adopting. There's a lot of work now really on these guardrails. Rodney can probably say how exactly they're used in their system if you catch him afterwards, the good-looking guy at the front.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Great talk, and I just had a quick question about your book. Is there anything when you started writing your book that you kind of changed your thinking, or something that you didn't expect as you were doing your research? And if you could just elaborate on that, or talk through some of that, that would be helpful. Thanks.
You mean during the writing of the book that we found? Some of the things are technical from the point of view of having much larger context windows, for example. Initially, when we started writing the book, we found that the input and the output had to be very limited. And then as time went on, I mean, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. So, for example, in the Claude system, you can put in, and many of the others, the equivalent of 500 pages now of documents. So we found that really an awful lot of development is happening the whole time, really. And of course, then from the point of view of the tool providers, there's been a lot of change as well that we found. We've worked with Dialogflow and Rasa and some of the others as well. And they've all been very, very busy. They've had to really to keep up with the times. So there's been an awful lot of things that have happened really just over the course of the last year. I think what I'm not so sure about is whether there's been a lot of uptake within the public domain as yet. It's all promising, but I think that's something we have to then see whether these new systems are going to be successful. And that's something we don't really know yet. We've heard some people talking about outcomes and so on, but not a lot really, so we don't know how it really is going to measure up from the customer experience point of view.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor. Really great talk. So let's give one last round of applause.